Okay, I wanted to give you a quick introduction to my course, the Master English Language course. So how should you use this course? Well, number one, I want you to use my book, which you will find below the lecture. It's in the resources for this lecture. So please download the PDF of this book. It's not the physical version, it's the ebook, the PDF. And you will find exercises on all of the chapters that we look at in this course. So certainly you will find chapters, well, they're very similar to this course: determiners, nouns, verbs, conjunctions, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions, phrases and clauses, rhetorical devices. It's not identical, the exercises are different. So please try some of the exercises in this book for extra practice. That's number one. Number two, we do a lot of parts of speech on this course. We do a lot of work on how to identify as well as how to use parts of speech. So how do you know if it's a preposition, a verb, an adjective, an adverb? And I want you to all use Macmillan Dictionary. It's online. You can all find it. It's got a big red banner at the top, Macmillan Dictionary. I prefer this dictionary because I believe it is much better than all the other dictionaries, especially for parts of speech. And this is because when you look up a word like that, which is a very difficult word, you will see on Macmillan that it's a demonstrative pronoun, it's a relative pronoun, it's a determiner, it's a subordinating conjunction. In fact, it's an adverb as well. I forgot that one. And what you'll find out is that Macmillan Dictionary has an example of it being used as a demonstrative pronoun, an example of it being used as a relative pronoun, an example of it being used as a determiner. So please use this dictionary because you don't find that in Oxford, you don't find it in Cambridge, you don't find it in Merriam-Webster, but you do find it in Macmillan Dictionary. So that's something else I wanted to explain right from the start. That's what I recommend. Macmillan Dictionary, it should come in handy when you're unsure as to the function of a word. And of course, if you have any questions about parts of speech, I do want you to ask questions. I can't emphasize this enough. I do respond within 24 hours to any questions on the Q&A on this course. So if you want clarification, please use me. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help. So we've got Macmillan Dictionary done. That's clear, I hope. There are 4 texts that I use on this course to practice all of the grammar, all of the punctuation, all of the rhetoric. These are the titles: Lord of the Flies by William Golding, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and 1984 and Animal Farm, both by George Orwell. Now, I chose these books for 2 reasons. Number one, they are typical GCSE texts. They are typical texts that 16-year-olds in the UK use, that they have to read at school. And I made this course not only for foreign students, but also for natives. So I wanted to use 4 books that are very, widely read, so that everyone is familiar with these 4 books, I think. And that's reason number one. Reason number two, I know you can all find a PDF of these books for free by putting it into Google. So just write the title in Google and you will find a free PDF very easily of any one of those 4 books. All of them are there online. So when you want to, if you would like to read these books that we look at, it's very easy to do so. And you can go and see for yourself that the concepts that I'm teaching on this course are found in all 4 books, and I want you to see that they're found in all books. I want you to look out for the comma rules, the punctuation rules, the absolute phrases, the participle phrases, the gerunds, the 2+ infinitives in the books that you're reading, okay? And you should see then that these ideas are everywhere. They're found in the books around us. Now, I wanted to quickly mention the GMAT exam, just because I believe this is a very good exam for extra practice. Only the sentence correction part, not the mathematics part, certainly not. But this exam, it's an American exam, and they give it to youngsters who want to go to the very top universities like Harvard, Stanford, Yale. And the sentence correction is an excellent grammar test. I've never seen one as hard as this sentence correction, and it's really good for parallel structure, subject-verb agreement, comparisons, pronouns, and you can actually find GMAT sentence correction questions simply by looking for them on Google again. And so you don't have to buy the book like I did, but personally I really like the sentence correction. I've learned a lot from this exam. You will learn a lot too. If you want something that's even harder than this course, I do recommend that, really, especially for parallel structure and subject-verb agreement and comparisons and pronouns. I think it's got some really good advice. It's got some really good questions to test your understanding. The explanation you can find on this course, but for extra exercises, that's a very good option. For extra comma exercises, you've got a website called chompchomp.com. Fantastic exercises for commas, especially exercise 3 and exercise 4. Grammar Book has some great exercises on colons, semicolons, hyphens, apostrophes. That's grammarbook.com. For the comma splice, I've made a class anyway on this that shows you the link. And so you'll have to watch that lesson. But there is a fantastic lesson from Gatto, from a website, Gatto, and then you'll have to watch the lesson for the full website there for that one. Look for the comma splice lecture. It's called Comma Splice Under the Microscope. And if you want more practical parts of speech, Towson University does have a lot of exercises which are good for parts of speech. And of course, if you do any of these exercises, including the ones that are on other websites, and you think that something's wrong on one of the questions, you ask me straight away and I will respond within 24 hours, because that's how we improve. Yeah, I know that it's annoying when you come across some kind of question that seems wrong to you, and you might be correct, it might well be wrong. There are lots of exercises online with 1 out of all 20 questions is incorrectly labelled on the answer or something like that. So please do ask questions. Questions help everybody. Okay, so if you have any more questions about where you can find other resources, do ask and I will do my best. I do know a lot of places where you can get extra practice on all of the topics on this course, so please ask. Okay, thanks for watching and I hope you enjoy the course. Okay, welcome to the second class on this course, which is on determiners and pronouns. We looked at determiners a lot in the previous class, and today I wanted to look at pronouns, and I really wanted to focus on mistakes. This is a course where we're going to look at a lot of mistakes that natives make, because native speakers do make a lot of mistakes. I'm going to get rid of all of those mistakes, and we're going to also look at how we improve our language, how we make our language more interesting. But let's start with some very common mistakes. Now, most natives, in my experience, say something like this, even though it's a massive mistake. They say things like, "Me and my girlfriend disagree." And when I first started teaching in Moscow, I even remember explaining to my students that for me, growing up in this area, this is the most common version I hear. "Me and my girlfriend disagree." Now, it's wrong because look, me disagree. Yeah, that's not very good English. Me disagree. Surely it's my girlfriend disagrees and I disagree, and not my girlfriend and me disagree. But loads of people say this. Absolutely loads of people use the me as a subject pronoun, and that's why I've written all of these things up here. Pronouns actually have a subject form, I, and that's the doer of the verb. We say I for the doer, you for the doer, he for the doer, she for the doer. The object, the thing having the verb done to it, that's me, you, so sometimes there's no difference. Him, that's different. Her, us, them, and it, where it's no different from the subject again. And also who versus whom is explained by this table, and we'll look at that in the next class. But please understand that what I'm trying to show you here is that these are the objects, and so you should never say me disagree. And that's why this is wrong. It should be my girlfriend and I. Yeah, and notice that I also put my girlfriend first. And I remember being told a long time ago that that's because, sorry, not the D, my girlfriend and I remember being told it's rude to put yourself first, and that's why you should say the other person first and then put I at the end. So if you're interested in why we put I usually at the end, that's what I was told was the reason, because it's more polite. But please remember that we've got to use subject pronouns for the doers of verbs, and that's why this is wrong, okay? But I'm going to show you in a second that we actually make this mistake all the time. So it's no wonder that it's crept into other sentences. Okay, let's look at number 2, because I want to point something out now, because some people, I suppose everybody has a tendency to apply a rule like this too vigorously. They suddenly start thinking that me is literally impossible at the start of the sentence. So look at this. Without my girlfriend and I, they left the restaurant. This is wrong. Yeah, this is wrong, like all of these sentences, in fact. This is wrong, and it's a consequence of people applying rule 1 too often. Yeah, like, without my girlfriend and I, they left the restaurant. That's wrong. It should be without my girlfriend and me. Now, why is it me? Well, it's because this, my girlfriend, and this, me, they are the object of the preposition without. Without is a preposition. And what that means is that without is always followed by an object. Yeah, nouns, yeah, the subjects and objects are nouns, but an object might be the object of a verb, like something like he kicked me. Yeah, me is the object of kicked, it's the one who was kicked. So it might be an object of a verb, but it also might be an object of a preposition without me, with me, on me. Yeah, he stood on me, or something like that. Then it's the object of a preposition. And so certainly it still must be without my girlfriend and me. They left the restaurant. This is the subject here, they, and here's the main clause. Left, verb, the restaurant, object. Okay? Try to think always in terms of subject, verb, object. It's the standard word order in English, and it's useful for understanding how words are functioning. Okay, look at the next one. And I think everybody says this sometimes. It's us who are to blame. Or it's me who is to blame. Lots of people would say, it's me who's to blame. It's me who's to blame. Very few would say, it is I who is to blame. Yeah, but that would be correct. Who am? No, it is I who am to blame. Sorry. It's quite difficult, all of this grammar, even though these are basic errors. It still is quite difficult, and it's because many of these basic errors are so deeply implanted, so deeply rooted in our brains that it's very hard to get rid of them. But let's analyse this sentence a little bit closer. It's us who are to blame. Well, this us is actually an object. Us, yeah, they killed us, yeah, and not us killed them. Us is an object. However, when we've got a sentence like this, it is. When we've got a sentence with the verb to be, yeah, this is the verb to be, we do, but we shouldn't actually use an object pronoun with a verb like to be. It should actually be the subject. So we shouldn't use us here. We should use we. It is we who are to blame. That would be the correct option. It is we who are to blame. Or it is I who am to blame. Yes, I who am to blame. Okay, now that might even sound a little bit strange to not a native speaker's ears, but this is the correct option. It really is. It's the same if we take a slightly different sentence. It is he who stole the money. Yeah, and let's split it up this time. It is he, not him. It is he who stole the money. And it really must be he, and it becomes more obvious here because he is a subject of stole. It is he who stole. He stole the money. So after the verb to be, you shouldn't actually use an object pronoun. You should use a subject pronoun. Even though all native speakers say this, they say, it's me, yeah? Who is calling? It's me, Dave. Yeah, everybody says this. All kids say this. If the teacher says, who would like to answer the question, they say, me, yeah, me want to answer the question. No, I want to answer the question. But they often say, it's me, or, we all do, not just children. And we say, look, it's them. It should actually be, it is they. But nobody says that. Even though grammatically, they, or it is I, or if you want to sound Shakespearean, you could say, 'tis I, Dave. Yeah, it's I. Sounds very Shakespearean, that, which shows that back in Shakespeare's time, they actually got this right more often, it seems to me. They used the subject pronoun when they should do. But you can see that this is tricky. After the verb to be, you ought to be using the subject pronoun and not the object pronoun. Although I must admit, I can't say that that's wrong, just because 99.9% of native speakers say it. But it's grammatically wrong, but I can't say that it's wrong because it is how we use the language. So, and same here, look, it's them. I would say about this that any time you go further, it's I who did that. It's I who am to blame. It's I. Yeah, then if you go further, give more information, I'd definitely use I, especially if you're writing a formal academic essay, because formally, academically, I is correct. But if you're in a everyday English situation where you just want to say, yeah, it's me, Yeah, I'm the one that's calling. Well, that's what we say. It's a very common mistake grammatically, but is it a mistake anymore? Because everybody says it. So it's one of those ones where it's difficult to say, is it a mistake or not? Okay, so I hope that's clear. After the verb to be is, we ought to actually use a subject and not an object. Okay, the snake shed its skin. This is a very tiny error, but it's very common. When we think about it, we don't mean the snake shed it is or it has. And it's with an apostrophe always means it is or it has. But we don't mean it is or it has. We mean the snake shed its own skin. This it is a possessive determiner. Just like it's shed his skin, her skin, my skin. Its skin, there is no apostrophe in the possessive determiner its. And so we need to take away the apostrophe, and then it's correct. The snake shed. Shed means get rid of, yeah? Get rid of something, shed. Its skin, it lost its skin, yeah? So no apostrophe for possessive determiners. Well, when it's it, no apostrophe for these possessive determiners. And that might seem strange to some of you, because if we take a name like Dave and put it on this list, we put Dave as the subject. Dave stays the same as Dave for the object. Yeah, he kicked Dave, he killed Dave, but Dave killed him. Yeah, but possessive determiner, Dave's with an apostrophe and an S. And so that might seem strange to some people, and I just want to point it out that possessive it doesn't have an apostrophe. It's only it is or it has that has an apostrophe, something that could be a source of confusion. Okay, another really common mistake among natives is mixing up you are and your. Now, I know a lot of my foreign students will find this very easy. See the difference between you are, so you are here, this one, and your, which is possessive. I think foreign students will find it very easy, but natives very often mix those up. And it's something to be aware of because it is a basic error. And you don't want to show people that you make basic mistakes, even if it's true. And we all do. We all make basic mistakes sometimes. But you don't want anybody knowing that. And so you want to try to avoid this mix-up between your and you are. And this is a very famous line. I think, it's something quite funny. Why not have a bit of humour in the lesson? This is a mild swear word, so don't say it in the wrong company, guys. It is a mild swear word, shit, of course, but it's not the worst word in English. I can think of thousands of words which are much worse, and to be quite frank, even if my 13-year-old child said that occasionally, it would not bother me one bit. But have a look at this. Good grammar is the difference between knowing your shit. Now, that actually means foreign speakers might find this really weird, but if you know your shit, you know your stuff. You know a lot about this thing. You know loads about this thing, yeah? And so I hope that I know my shit when it comes to grammar. Yeah, I hope I do anyway. Sometimes I do, sometimes not so much. But if you know your shit about something, you know that area, you know that field, you know a lot about it. However, if you know you are shit, you know you are terrible at something, you know you are bad at something. And so there's a nice little pun here, a nice little joke, not a pun, sorry, a nice little joke on the difference between these two phrases that sound exactly the same. Knowing your shit, they sound exactly the same. But of course, if you are aware of the grammatical difference, and look, the difference between, I think it is a pun, because it's a play on the words, the difference between. There is a difference between knowing your shit and knowing your shit, even though it doesn't sound like there's a difference. And of course, a good grammarian knows exactly what that difference is. They understand that you need to use an apostrophe when it's you are, but you mustn't use an apostrophe with an E at the end if you're referring to the possessive determiner, your stuff. If you know your stuff, you know a lot about that topic. And bear in mind that you can say it like that if you don't want to use the rude version, the swear word version. You can say knowing your stuff. He knows his stuff, and it means he knows a lot about that topic. Okay? So it's another mistake to avoid. I don't know who is car that is. Yeah, that's how I read that, who is. A lot of people mix up who is and whose, which is the possessive determiner. And of course, here we're saying, I don't know who that car belongs to. So we're talking about possession, and that's why that is wrong, and we need to use the possessive determiner, whose. Okay, I don't know whose car that is, yeah? And so do be aware that that's another mistake that people make. And lastly, people very often mix up there, and there. Now, what am I talking about? They all sound the same again. there, which is a possessive determiner, just like your, yeah? Their car is across the street. Their son goes to Oxford University. Their president is a load of rubbish, yeah? Whatever it is, there indicates possession. They are, but pronounced there means they are, yeah? And there, like he lives over there, or there is a television in this room, there is a table in the corner, yeah? This there is very different. This bottom there is an adverb sometimes when it's telling you where. When you say he lives there, then there is an adverb. It's describing where he lives. He lives there. But if you say there is a, then there is a dummy pronoun. If you want more information about dummy pronouns, it's on page 16 of this book. Yeah, don't forget about this book. This is where you get more exercises from, guys. Don't want anybody on this course complaining that there isn't enough material. There's a lot more if you use the PDF. And so do come here for more exercises. So we've got 3 different types of there. We've got possessive there, we've got they are, and we've got there, which could be a dummy pronoun. There is a, there was a, and do notice that it's always a here. Why? Because it's an existential clause. It's not there is the, yeah? And I think that's something so important for foreign students to learn. So it could be a dummy pronoun, but it could also be an adverb. He lives there, just like he lives here. Here is an adverb as well. We're going to do a lot on parts of speech on this course. So there's a mistake here. They are going to join us later, surely. And so we need to change this to there, like that. But lots of natives mix up. They are, there, which is possessive, and there, which is a dummy pronoun or an adverb. Okay? So please try the quiz under the video. If you want more exercises, there are plenty more in here. So please do try some more exercises from my PDF. And I hope to see you all in the next class where we'll look at the difference between who and whom, which is also quite useful. Okay, I wanted to do a quick class on who versus whom. Now, the good news is 99% of native speakers never, ever use whom. So that means that you don't really have to use whom if you don't want to, but you might need to use it at work or in written communication. Schools are very careful to remember that they use whom and not who when they should do. That doesn't mean that the English teachers who work at the school always use whom in their speech, and I am not attacking them or criticising them, because I don't actually use it in my speech if I'm 100% honest. But it should be there in your writing. Informal academic writing, it should be there certainly. And so if you're doing an essay for school, or if you are writing business emails, something like that, you might want to know about whom, just like you might want to know about subjunctive, which is down here in number 6. I thought I'd remind you of that. But what is the difference between who and whom? Well, firstly, remember that these guys are called relative pronouns. And it's a great name, because relative pronoun means I start a relative clause. They're pronouns because the definition of a pronoun is that it's a word that stands in for a noun. So when I say I am teaching you, I is standing for Dave. Dave is teaching you. Yeah, that's the idea. You stands in for your name. Yeah, he stands in for his name. And the same with these pronouns here, me, you, him, her, us, them. The only difference about these pronouns is that we call these object pronouns and we call these subject pronouns. And they're good names because these guys are always the subject of the verb, I, you, he, she, we, they. And that just means the doer of the verb. It means that in a normal, typical sentence, you'll see them before the verb. Because English sentences, not always, but most of the time, they go subject, verb, object. Yeah, not always, but yeah, most of the time in the most typical sentences. So these are the subject pronouns, I, you, he, she, we, and they. And who is a subject pronoun, okay? I want you to know that first. These are the object pronouns, me, you, him, her, us, them, and whom is an object pronoun. And what I want you to notice is that him, them, whom, they all end in that m sound, and I assume it's because it's a case ending, if you're interested. But I assume that's the accusative case ending, because the accusative is the object of the verb, usually. Okay, so they're your object pronouns, and whom is an object pronoun. These are possessive pronouns, my, your, his, her, our, their. However, possessive pronoun is a bad name. I have to use the name because a lot of the grammar books use the name, but these are badly named. Not these ones on the right, which are reasonably named, but these are badly named. They should be called possessive adjectives or possessive determiners. Why? Because they're not standing in for a noun. They are describing a noun. When you say my hat, my describes the hat. Your glasses, your describes the glasses. His clothes, his describes the clothes. Her kitten, her describes the kitten. Our shed, our describes the shed. Yeah, and in that sense, they are determiners. Possessive determiners would be a better name, but they're related. You can see that to the other pronouns. Certainly, I mean, some of them are even identical to the pronoun form. Yeah, so they are related. But these guys are possessive determiners. Some people call them possessive adjectives, which is fine because determiners are irremovable adjectives. And these are equivalent to whose. Yeah, we've got, and notice again the okay, it's only on the his nowadays, but you've got his and whose, him and whom. Yeah, they're equivalent. So whose is a possessive determiner. It's not really, strictly speaking, a pronoun. But mine, yours, his, hers, ours, theirs, these guys really are pronouns because they stand in for nouns. When you say, you know, whose is that? It's mine, it's mine. Mine stands in for my bag or my phone or my hat, whatever. So it actually stands in for a noun phrase, my hat, my bag. And in that sense, these guys really are pronouns. So there's a little bit of grammar theory for you, and I will go very deep into grammatical theory in the next course on English language, which will be aimed at natives and competent English speakers. You know, anyone who's been learning English for a long time will be able to do that course as well. Now, which is better, he or him, they or them? This is the test for what should you use, who or whom. So look at number one. Who or whom wrote the letter? Well, would we say he wrote the letter or him wrote the letter? Of course, we would say who wrote the letter, so that is the correct option. Yeah, and would you say they wrote the letter or them wrote the letter? Of course, you would say they wrote the letter, so who is the correct option? Look at number two. Who or whom should I contact? So you can rearrange this word order a little bit to make it make sense. Would you say I should contact them, or would you say I should contact they? Would you say I should contact him, or would you say I should contact he? Of course, it's him, it's them, so we need the m at the end. We need the object pronoun. This is the object of the verb contact. This is the subject of the verb wrote. So they are different. I've already discussed this with the guy who or whom you work with. Well, you work with him, you work with them, not you work with he or you work with they. And so this is an object pronoun. It's the object of the preposition with. Yeah, this one was the object of the verb contact. This is the object of the preposition with. We'll do that in a lot of detail in the next course. Have a look at number four. The chap who or whom lives next door is a musician. Well, would we say he lives next door, or would we say him lives next door? Of course, we say he lives next door. We'd say they live next door if it's the chaps. And by the way, chap means guy. Yeah, it's quite an old-fashioned way of saying guy, chap. But it's still around, and you'll still hear it. And don't forget, guys, that these are all relative. Well, these two are both relative clauses. This one is a relative clause. And notice it's a defining relative clause, so no comma. In fact, I don't know why, but all the relative clauses today are defining. Same here. The chap is a vague word, and then we make it specific by saying the chap who lives next door. That's defining which chap. That chap is a musician. So this is a defining relative clause. Number five, under no circumstances would I, don't forget inversion, yeah, this is a negative adverbial, so we use inversion. Under no circumstances would I live with someone, and look at that vague pronoun, someone who or whom smoked. Well, we would say he smoked, not him smoked. So it's who. Yeah. And notice that this is the relative clause. It's a defining relative clause again. Yeah. So you see relative clauses all the time. Don't ignore them. Make sure you've got a good grasp of them because it will make writing much easier. Number 6 is not inversion, but it is subjunctive. We demand that those. Now, would we say they are responsible or them are responsible? Of course we'd say they are responsible, so that's the correct one. We demand that those who are responsible, defining which those, be punished. There's a subjunctive. Look at that. Be. We demand that they be punished. That those who are responsible be punished. Okay, so don't forget these old topics. Now, one more thing I thought I'd do today. I want to make it clear that these two guys, sure, which can be a relative pronoun and very often is a relative pronoun, just like who, whom, that. And yeah, okay, should I call who's a relative pronoun? No, not really, because it's a determiner. Let's call it a relative determiner. Yeah, let's call it a relative determiner because that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, and whose does start a relative clause, but it's really a determiner because when you say whose hat, whose car, it's identifying the hat, the car. So what and which are both determiners sometimes. And it's when they come before a noun. What man, which car, what woman, which shed, which book, what time, even something like that. It's a determiner. And there is a difference. What, in a nutshell, is for an unknown number. Is when you have an unknown number of something. When an infinite number of something or an unknown number of something, use what. And when there's a known number, when the set is limited, when there's only a finite number of possibilities, use which. Now, this is all starting to sound very philosophical, but you'll see that it's not so hard. So number 7, would we say what flavour of ice cream or which flavour of ice cream do you prefer? Now, it depends on context, like so often with language. Let's say that you're in an ice cream shop and there are 3 flavours in front of you, vanilla, chocolate, and my favourite, choc chip or something like that. Yeah, mint, I quite like mint as well. And I like lemon ice, but there's 3 flavours in front of you. You would definitely say which, because there's a finite number of possibilities or options. There's a finite number of options, and you say which flavour of ice cream would you like. So if you say do you prefer, normally there is a finite number. Do you prefer A, B or C? So do you prefer is very often which. But if we get rid of do you prefer and you're just asking somebody randomly, what flavour of ice cream do you like the most? Yeah, out of the infinite number of flavours of ice cream that are out there, and we don't even know how many, the person you're talking to might name a flavour that you aren't aware of, something like that. So then you would say what? It depends on the context, yeah, but with do you prefer, if there are 3 options, it would definitely be which. Yeah, because that's a known number of options. Look at number 8. Here, there's only 2 options, the right foot or the left foot, yeah? And so definitely here we would say which. Which foot do you kick the ball with? Because it's only the right one or the left one. So there's only 2 options. And so here you've got to use which if it's a finite number of possibility. Use which in number 7 if there are 3 options, 3 flavours in front of you. But use what if you're just asking someone randomly. Use which in number 8 because there's a left and a right foot. Number 9, okay, you're just asking someone randomly here, it sounds like, yeah? What car do you drive? It could be there's an unknown number of different cars. I don't know how many different cars there are. I know nothing about cars. And so there's an unknown number of different types of car. There's an infinite number of possibilities. What car do you drive? Yeah, and if you're just asking someone randomly, tonight, let's go out and let's eat out. What restaurant shall we go to? If you don't have a list of options, if you're sitting there with your friend and you've got 3 options or 5 options in front of you, then you will say, which restaurant shall we go to? Don't forget you use shall for future tenses. Instead of will, you use shall with I and we in questions. Shall we go to? Okay, and lastly, don't forget whichever and whatever, which means it doesn't matter what one, it doesn't matter which one. Have a look at number 11. Let's meet at whatever time you like. Yeah, I've tried to put 2 options here. Let's meet at whatever time you like, because that's an unknown number of possibilities. But let's say that you've got 2 options. You've got 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock, and you've just said, we could meet at 8 or we could meet at 9. Let's meet at whichever time you prefer. And again, prefer sounds like there's a limited number of options. Okay, so I hope that's made it clear about these two determiners, what the difference is. It's not so tough, but the difference here between who and whom, natives mess up all the time. And I did forget to tell you one thing, and this is tricky. Be careful, because if you give people this test, he or him, they or them, natives will definitely still mess up this sentence. Have a look at this. It was he or him, that or who or whom stole the apple. Now, I think most foreign learners of English will get this one right, but I think most natives might get this one wrong. Yeah? Think about it. When natives use the verb to be, they say, it is me. Yeah? When somebody says, who stole the apple? It was me, or it was him. That is how we speak. But technically, it's not correct. It should be, twas I, 'twas he. It starts to make you sound like you're speaking, like you're from Shakespeare's time when you speak like that, when you say, it was I, it was he. But when you continue the sentence, if you want to say, it was he, this is the correct one, it was he, and then that or who stole the apple, but not whom, because it's not him. And this is actually the only way that the sentence makes sense. But I must admit that a lot of natives will say, it was him that stole the apple. It was him who stole the apple. That's wrong. It's bad English. But so many natives say it, I find it hard to say that it's bad English. It really is. There's not a single native out there that says, it is I, or it is he, or it was he. But technically speaking, with copular verbs, it should be the subject pronoun after the verb. And it's because there's an equivalence between the subject and we call it a complement, not an object. It's not an object. There's an equivalence between the subject and the complement, and that's why it should actually be a subject pronoun, not an object pronoun. But nobody uses English like that, and so you don't have to either. Yeah, that's the strange thing. But this is a very obvious example of somewhere where everybody uses the grammar incorrectly, and it's a really big mistake, in my opinion, but everybody uses it incorrectly, just like very few people actually use that word. Okay, thanks everybody for watching. Try questions under the video, and I'll see you all soon. Okay, welcome everybody to a class on the parts of speech. It's my mission to make sure that everybody on this course can take any book and take any sentence in any book and understand what each and every word does. Now that's a really difficult thing to do, so I've given myself a really challenging task because I've been doing this, analysing parts of speech with native speakers, with English teachers, for a very long time now, for at least 4 or 5 years. And I have learned that it's really difficult, but it's not easy at all, and that there will be some words which will be on the border between two categories. But generally speaking, you ought to be able to argue that the word is either a preposition, a determiner, an adjective, a noun, a verb, an adverb, or a conjunction. And so we're going to use these words a lot on this course because they're very useful words. And these words tell you the function of the word, what the word actually does. So for example, an adjective is not a thing. A noun is a thing. An adjective describes a noun. An adjective describes a thing. So there's a very big difference between a word like big or small and a word like house, car, dog. Big and small describe a house, they describe a car, they describe a dog. Yeah. Whereas these three don't describe anything. They just they signify a thing. Yeah. A house, a car, a dog. So you can see that these are different types of words, and you ought to be able to make a decision when you're looking at a sentence what type of word it is. And in the quiz below this lesson, you will have to do this. I'm going to give you the first sentence from Animal Farm, and you have to decide, is it a preposition, a determiner, an adjective, as you go along the sentence. And so we need to learn a few things first. And I wanted to give you a general overview. This lesson will not have all the details, but it will have a lot. We'll have to go into we'll have to delve deeper into the details in future classes, and we will do a lot on parts of speech. So what is a preposition? The preposition very often describes the position of a noun, and I think that's worth remembering, and it's not hard to remember because preposition, yeah? Pre refers to the fact that it goes before the noun, yeah? You don't normally say the chair on, you say on the chair. Yeah, he was on the chair, not he was the chair on. If you said he was the chair on, which we don't, that would be a post position, wouldn't it, really? But this is a preposition. So we call them prepositions because the preposition goes before the noun and it describes position often, but it doesn't have to. Okay, a preposition does not have to be about position at all, but it very often is. So when you say in, out, on, off, up, down, you're talking about position, spatial position. When you say before, after, for, or since, you're very often talking about temporal position, yeah? Position in time. So it's not just space, it's position in time or position in space. But the really important thing about a preposition isn't position. It's that it sets up a relationship to a noun. And that means that after prepositions, you find nouns. So let me give you some examples. In the garden, on the chair, under the table, round the forest, across the field, under the canopy. There are loads, guys. Over the fence, yeah. Over is a preposition. Under is a preposition. Up, down, on, off, in, out are prepositions when they set up a relationship to a noun. Okay. So that is what a preposition is in a nutshell. But they don't have to talk about position. So, for example, let me give you a preposition that doesn't talk about position. For example, the preposition without isn't really about position, is it? When you say, I went there without a good reason, yeah? Or I did it. I killed him without a good reason, yeah? Without is followed by a noun. Without what? Without a reason. Reason is a noun. And so prepositions must be followed, not immediately necessarily, but they must have a noun that they set up a relationship to. And I'm going to tell you right now that there's a reason why I wrote preposition, determiner, adjective, noun. There is a good reason why I put things in that order. Forget those other words, which haven't really got a good reason for being in that order. But these four have, and that's that you very often see preposition, determiner, adjective, noun. Very often. You see in the small house, or you see up a tiny street, yeah, or you say he got off your massive boat, yeah, he got off your massive boat, whatever. You very often see preposition, determiner, adjective, noun, and that's worth remembering. The adjective might not be there. You might see in the garden, under the chair, on the table, yeah, the adjective might not be there, but it might be there. There might be 5 adjectives there. It might be on the round, metal, expensive table, yeah? Did I say that the right way around? I didn't actually. On the metal, round, expensive table. That would be a better order of adjectives, because order of adjectives is important. You don't normally say things, you normally say things, put adjectives in a certain order. Okay, so that's what you very often see. And one thing I want you to certainly remember is that preposition must be followed by a noun. That's really important. And just memorise a certain few prepositions that sound like positions here. In, out, on, off, up, down. There are lots. With is another preposition. With, without. Yeah, quite often you'll have opposites like that. And I want to mention one more thing. When the preposition has no object, yeah, and sometimes prepositions don't have an object. Sometimes you see a preposition, sometimes you see this. He walked in, full stop. In isn't followed by a noun. So what is in a sentence like he walked in, or he looked up, or she went out? Well, if it doesn't have an object, it's an adverb. Why? Because it's describing where he looked. Where did he look? Up. Okay, it's describing the verb. This up is an adverb. Why? Because it doesn't have an object. That's why it's not a preposition. This out is an adverb. It's describing where she went. She went out. And so if the preposition, if a word which is a typical preposition doesn't have an object, it usually becomes an adverb. And I think that's really worth remembering. Okay, determiners. Determiners identify and quantify the noun, which means they are also followed by a noun. Maybe not immediately, there might be an adjective in there first, but there must be a noun after words like a, an, and the. And I want you to prove it to yourself now, guys. Try to think of a time when you see a or the without a noun after them, and you'll realise it doesn't happen. It never happens. And that's because determiners identify or quantify the noun. So these guys are all identifiers, really. They don't really quantify, they identify. A and the, my, your, its. Notice that these are possessive pronouns, but possessive pronoun is an awful name because possessive pronouns are not things, so they're not nouns, so they're not really pronouns. They should be called possessive determiners or even possessive adjectives, because determiners are a subgroup of adjectives, although they are different to an ordinary adjective. They are. I like to think of them as irremovable adjectives that can't be taken out, although ordinary adjectives can be taken out. You know, you can say, I got off the big boat, or you can say, I got off the boat, but you can't say, I got off boat. And you can see, therefore, that determiners are kind of irremovable adjectives, okay? So these guys identify the noun, but a lot of the pre-determiners and the post-determiners, now what am I talking about here? Well, think of these guys as standard determiners. A and the, my or its, his, her, their, all the possessive pronouns, let's call them possessive determiners. Names in the possessive case are determiners. They're identifying whose hat it is, or whose house it is, or whose car it is. So Dave's house, that's definitely a determiner. It's not a noun, yeah? And when you think about it, Dave's, is that me? No. Is it a thing? No. Is it even a person? No. It's describing something. When you say Dave's shed, that's describing the shed. And so it's identifying the shed, so it's a determiner. But think of these determiners that identify as standard determiners. But these guys, the predeterminers, very often quantify twice, half, and they go before this determiner. So you very often see twice the money. He promised to pay me twice the money. Yeah, and then you've got determiner, predeterminer, determiner, and then money. And this one quantifies, this one identifies. Or you might say he decided to pay me half the money. And again, it's a predeterminer because it goes before the central determiner. Now there are some other determiners like whatter and such a, and I want you to remember that they're usually followed by a and not the. They're never followed by the. They're like existential clauses. Now, I taught existential clauses in my previous course on grammar, and it's quite complicated, but these guys, they go before a, not before the. What a wonderful hotel. Such an expensive restaurant. Quite a lovely day. Yeah. Those three all go before a, and rather works as well. Rather. But what a, such a, quite a, these got predeterminers. And both and all, they quantify as well, don't they? Both the students, all the students, they're predeterminers. Post-determiners also quantify. Yeah, you could say the two men that I met yesterday. Yeah, the two men that I met yesterday. Okay, so you can use the and numbers together, and a lot of people don't know this. You even need to if you're using superlatives. So if you want to say the 3 cheapest chocolate bars are, yeah, the 3 cheapest. The 3 cheapest chocolate bars, yeah? So you can also use first, second, last, next, few, several, many, and notice they all quantify, don't they? They're telling you that they're quantifying. These are identifying last and next, and maybe even first and second. But the rest are quantifying. Now, I want to prove to you that a determiner is different from an adjective, and this is the best way I can. I have very little money. Look at the meaning of that little, and it means not much. Yeah, it just means not much. I have very little money. I have not much money. Now look at this. Does it mean not much? I have a little house. No, it means small. It doesn't mean not much. It can make sense to say, I have a not much house. That doesn't make any sense at all. So this is a determiner. It's quantifying the money, not much. This is an adjective. It's describing the house. It's not quantifying it. It's describing it. It's saying it's small. So you can see there is a difference between a determiner and an adjective. And adjectives can be removed. Yeah, you can say I have a house, but I have money. Okay, it's completely different from I have little money, and that's why it's irremovable. You remove it and it completely changes the sentence. Okay, so adjectives describe nouns, guys. So big, small, they're adjectives. But I want you to remember participles, which often look like verbs. Yeah, sweating would be a participle, although it can be a verb as well. If you say, I am sweating, I call that a verb. Why? Because sweating has a doer. I am sweating. If sweating has a doer, on this course, we will call it a verb. And that's because, as far as I'm concerned, a verb must have a doer. I appreciate how grammar books do this nowadays, and they separate verbs into finite verb forms and non-finite verb forms. But I think there's an easier way, and that's the way we're going to do things on this course, which is verb must have subject, must have doer, participle does not have a doer, does not have a subject. And this is very important. And on this course, I want to teach you how to recognize the difference between a participle and a verb. So I am sweating. That is not an adjective. Sweating, that is a verb, yeah, because it's got a doer. But if you do something like this, if you say something like sweating profusely, I felt very nervous. Yes, sweating profusely. Yes. Sweating profusely, I felt nervous, and that would need a comma there. I felt nervous. Okay, now this sweating is describing the I, which already has a verb. Look, I felt. So there's your verb. Felt is the verb, we're a doer, but sweating is an adjective describing the I. So these participles, which end in ing and ed, are adjectives, and I think that's important. We will look at participles and gerunds a lot on this course. Now, nouns are things like house, car, dog, but they don't have to be physical things that you can touch. Anything ending in ation or shun, anything ending in this shun sound, or I shouldn't say anything, but 99% of words ending in the shun sound are nouns. Information, reduction, communication, separation, there are loads of them, guys. There are absolutely loads of them. And they are very often abstract nouns, things you can't touch, okay? But they are nouns because they are things. Information is a thing, a reduction is a thing, okay? And they are used like nouns. Now, what I mean, nouns function, usually these are three main roles of any noun. Subject of verb, object of verb, object of preposition, and I always forget one which somebody will say later, and so I better write it down. Complement, subject complement. Now, what does that mean? It just means that it's used with the verb to be, basically. You very often see that you can say, I am a teacher, a doctor, a builder, yeah, or I am a teacher. Now, a teacher is actually a noun, and it's the complement of the verb to be. So this is subject complement. It's the word that comes after to be. This is the subject of the verb to be, I, and that's the complement. We don't call it the object. Why? Because am is a copular verb, be is a copular verb, and that means that it can be followed by an adjective, and other verbs are different. But it can be the subject complement, the subject of a verb, the object of a verb, or the object of a preposition. They're the main jobs of nouns. That's what nouns do. And I want to make it clear that running, sweating, playing can be things. They can be activities, in which case they are gerunds, and they will be the subject of the verb, or the object of the verb, or the object of the preposition. Something like playing football is fun. Yeah, that's subject to the verb, or the verb is. Or I like playing football. Playing football is the object of like. Yeah. Or I am interested in playing football. Playing football is the object of the preposition in. Okay, so you can get gerunds as well that end in ing. They look exactly the same as participles. Yes, sweating might be a participle, it might be a gerund, which makes them a nightmare. So we will be looking at the difference between participles and gerunds as well. Okay, verb. We've done all of that, and finally we get to the verb. You know, I put that in that order just because I know you do often see in the big house. But verb normally comes after the doer, and that's because verbs must have a doer. On this course anyway, a verb must have a doer. It must have subject. I think that this is a much better way of teaching it. It's just the way I happen to think of it. But have a look at my examples down here, and I hope you can see, right down at the bottom of the board, I think you can. Have a look at this example here. I made a cake, and cars made in Japan. Now, I use this example to teach the difference between verb and participle, and I use it. Please, if you want more information about this, guys, do consider checking the PDF that you all got for free on this course of Grammar in Theory and in Practice. There are more exercises in here on this theme. But look at this example. I made a cake. Made has a doer. I made the cake. So that's a verb, that first one. Cars made in Japan. Did the cars make something in Japan? No, cars can't make anything. This actually means cars which have been made in Japan, or cars which were made in Japan. And this made in Japan is acting like a big adjective describing cars. It's not a verb. So I want to be clear here that participles look like verbs and verbs look like participles, but separate the two in your head and it will make it easier to understand the sentence. Now, I've said already you get copular verbs, and that means you get complements as well as objects, and that's another complication. But be, become, and get are copular, and the reason why all three of these are copular, you can say I am hot, I got hot, I became hot. You can use an adjective after this verb, like here, up here, I've written up here. And you can't do that with any other verb. That's the first thing to notice. With non-copular verbs, you can't say I play hot. You'd have to say, you know, something else. I mean, let's take a different example. Something like, I was happy. If you put happy with play, I played happy. No, I played happily. So we need to use an adverb with ordinary verbs, but we can use an adjective with copular verbs. And I want you to notice that the adjective describes something earlier than it. Usually adjectives describe the next noun, big house, small house. But if you say I am big or I am small, then it describes the earlier pronoun, and that's what we call I, you, he, she, we, they, because these words stand in for a noun. And pronouns are nouns, but they're just words that stand in for a noun. Okay? Now, ordinary verbs, and copular verbs actually, but these verbs, they have many different tenses. So don't think that a verb is one word. If you think that, then you will be immediately, well, you'll find out otherwise pretty quickly. Because look, we've got loads of different tenses. And even when we make a verb negative, you know, you say I smoke, but how do you make that negative? Well, you say I don't smoke. And don't we call an auxiliary verb. Auxiliary means helping, and it's helping to make the sentence negative. So didn't play is negative in the past, okay? But it's still verb. So you will see lots of verb chains. You will see have been playing, that's a tense. You will see hadn't played. And if you see a word that is being put into, that can be put into different tenses, well, it's probably a verb, because verbs are the only one up here that can be put into different tenses. So that's worth knowing, I think. And thirdly, you've got copular verbs, ordinary verbs. You've also got modal verbs. And these are a little bit different from an ordinary verb or even a copular verb, because these guys don't change their form. They have no 2+ infinitive form, no gerund, no participle. You can't say canning, coulding, willing, woulding. But you can say playing, running, sweating, having, being. Yeah, but you can't do that with a modal verbs. You can't make participles, you can't make gerunds, can't make 2+ infinitive. You can say to play, to go, to want, but you can't say to can, to could, to will, to would. Doesn't work. And even with the he and she forms, we say he plays, she plays, he goes, he wants, he can, he could, he will, he would, he shall, he should. So there's no S on the he and she forms with modals, and that's worth knowing. Now, whenever you see this 2+ infinitive, guys, you might be tempted to look at the to and think preposition, because to can be a preposition. Let's put it over here as a preposition. To plus noun is a preposition. I went to the shop. Yeah, I went to the shop. That's to as a preposition. But when you see 2+ infinitive, it is not a preposition. So what is it? I don't know, guys. I honestly don't know. That to before a verb, it's unlike all the other words that we're going to ever look at. It really is. It's unlike every other word in the English language. And I consider it as part of the verb phrase, as part of the 2+ infinitive verb phrase. And that's why when you see 2+ infinitive in the exercise below this lesson, I want you to remember that that is not preposition. I won't even ask you what that is, because I'm well aware that it's nothing up there. Yeah, it's a weird and wonderful word that is in a class of its own. I just think of it as 2+ infinitive. And I don't be tempted to say it's a preposition, because it's not. Preposition must be followed by a noun, and that is not a noun. Okay, adverb. Adverbs are often misunderstood creatures, and they're more complicated than the rest because they do more jobs. Adjectives are lazy. They only describe nouns. That's all they do. I mean, useless. Adverbs describe verb, adjective, adverb, or entire clause. They can describe any one of those four. So these guys describe a lot more than these guys, really. And so, okay, these are describing words, but they describe nouns. These are describing words as well, but they describe verbs, adjectives, adverbs, and entire clauses. And it's worth remembering that the ending of an adverb is often, but not always, often ly. Yeah? If you've got an adjective like beautiful, you make the adverb with beautifully. Happy, happily. Sad, sadly. Slow, slowly, and so on. It doesn't always work, because you get to something like fast, but quickly, it works. Okay, here's some examples of an adverb being used to describe a verb. So I drove slowly. Slowly describe the verb drove. But if you say I drove incredibly slow, oh, sorry, that was wrong. But if you say that guy is incredibly slow, yeah, copula verb is incredibly slow, then incredibly is modifying slow, is describing. When I say modify, I mean describe. Incredibly describes how slow. It wasn't just slow, it was incredibly slow. It was really slow. Yeah, and so really and incredibly are adverbs because they describe an adjective there, incredibly slow. And slow, well, you could say I drove incredibly slowly. You shouldn't really say I drove incredibly slow, although there is something called a flat adverb and slow can be used like that. So perhaps I should have chosen a different adverb for this example. But nonetheless, all I'm trying to show you here is that adverb, like incredibly, it can describe an adjective, incredibly quick. Or it can describe an adverb, incredibly quickly. Yeah, it can do both because adverbs describe adjectives or adverbs or verbs or even entire clauses. And these ones are called sentence adverbs or conjunctive adverbs. We will be looking at those in detail in future classes. And just to give you an idea of how there really is a big difference between an adverb which modifies, which describes a verb, and an adverb which modifies, which describes an entire clause. Have a look at this. Clearly, he speaks Japanese. That means it is clear to me that he speaks Japanese, and this clearly is a comment from the narrator describing the whole main clause. It's clear to me that he speaks Japanese. But if you say he speaks Japanese clearly, that means he speaks the language of Japanese in a clear way. So this clearly is only modifying speaks Japanese, yeah? He speaks Japanese in a clear way. So there's a very big difference between an adverb that describes an entire clause and an adverb that describes just a verb, yeah? First one is a sentence adverb. Clearly, he speaks Japanese. The second one describes the manner in which he spoke. He speaks Japanese in a clear way. He speaks Japanese clearly. Okay, lastly, we've got conjunctions. And as you probably guessed in the name, conjunction, it joins clauses or phrases together. This whole course is about clauses and phrases. So conjunction is a very important word, perhaps one of the most important on here, maybe the most important. Now, what types of conjunction are there? There are fanboys. Now, what are fanboys? For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. They are the 7 words, the only 7 words, that join equal parts of sentences together. And it's equal parts with these 7 words, which means we need to think about parallel structure when we're using these conjunctions. That's the idea that you've got to that when you have a list of equal things, they must be equal. They must be equal, yeah? It's also the idea that you compare equal things, that if you're making a comparison, you ought to compare equal things or similar things. These guys, they join main clauses together. You can have main clause and main clause. But they can join verb phrases. You can say, I bought a newspaper and went home. And that's, I bought blah, 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 and went blah, blah, blah. So the and is connecting bought, went is connecting 2 verb phrases. But as soon as you say, I bought a newspaper and I went home, if you've got the I twice, you've got 2 main clauses. So you've got the 7 coordinating conjunctions. They join equal parts, equal phrases, equal clauses. You've got loads, probably 50 or 60, maybe more, of subordinating conjunctions, and these join, but they don't join equal parts, they join unequal parts. The time when we're interested in them is when they join a subordinate clause to a main clause, and we will look at that in more detail. But these are words like although, if, when, while, before, since. Now, some of you will have noticed that before and since in conjunction column and before and since are in preposition column. So have I made a mistake? Of course not. What I'm trying to show you guys is that before, we can say before lunch, I bought a newspaper. Yeah? And when we say it like that, before lunch, before noun, main clause, yeah, before lunch I bought a newspaper. When we say before lunch, that's before plus noun, yeah? That's before there's a preposition. Before lunch, I bought a newspaper. But when we say this, when we say before I had lunch, before plus clause, before, yeah, and subject to verb basically, before plus clause, before I had lunch, then before is a conjunction. Yeah, if it's before plus clause, it's a conjunction. If it's before plus noun, it's a preposition. Same goes for since. Same goes for after. We can say after lunch, I played tennis. Or we can say after I had lunch, comma, I played tennis. Yeah, so it depends how you're using it. Same with since. You can say I haven't seen him since Tuesday. Since Tuesday. Since plus noun, preposition. Yeah. But if you say since I was born, or since I met him, I haven't heard from him. Yeah, I haven't heard from him since I met him. So there, notice you've got since I met, you've got a conjunction. Since is a conjunction, it's followed by a clause. Okay, so that shows you what a conjunction is compared to a preposition. Now, lastly, you do have something called correlative conjunctions, which are two-part conjunctions. These are not just one word. They must be at least two, because they're two-part conjunctions, not X, something like this, neither X nor Y. And the reason why they're conjunctions is because the X and the Y can be clauses as well as phrases, yeah? It could be just a noun, like I told neither him nor her, then you just got neither noun nor noun. But you could say something like this, neither did I want to go there, nor did I want to say. Something like that would be neither clause nor clause. So you can have clauses joining there, and that's another conjunction. Not only X, but also Y, neither X nor Y. We will look at lots of them in a future class. I wanted to just mention them today. Okay, I think that is all I wanted to speak about today. What I'd like you to do now is try the test under the video. I want you to look at the quiz, look at this sentence, and try and work out, is it a preposition, is it a conjunction, is it a verb, is it a noun, is it an adjective? And we will do this a lot on this course because I think that it's very useful for analysing sentences and for using rhetorical devices in your speech, yeah, and for using literary devices in your creative writing. I think it's really useful to learn all of these and to think about the construction in front of you, to think about the sentence in front of you, to understand it to a deeper level. Okay, thanks for watching Parts of Speech. We will do more on this in future, so please don't forget it, and I hope to see you all soon. Okay, welcome to a class on another one of my favourite topics, appositives. And I really like this topic because I think you can have a lot of fun with your rhetoric, yeah, with your spoken language by using appositives effectively. Now, I like to think of appositives as a rhetorical device. Somebody recently told me that they're not rhetorical devices, definitely not. But for me, any way that you use the language skillfully in order to persuade somebody that something is the case, or in order to persuade somebody even of in order to make your story more interesting, for example, as a writer, I would say that any device you use, in my opinion, can be considered a rhetorical device. I know that a lot of people think of rhetoric as a Greek word, which it is. And for that reason, I think they believe that epistrophe, anaphora, anadiplosis, if any of you know what these words mean, they are Greek words that describe different types of rhetorical device. And appositive is, of course, a Latin word. And I suppose that's why some people claim that appositives are not rhetorical devices. But for me, they are. And that's because anything, even fronting, for me, is a type of rhetorical device. Inversion is a type of rhetorical device. And appositive, you can have so much fun with appositives, and writers do. And so, for me, they are certainly a rhetorical device. Okay, so if you want more information about this, please look at in the ebook that's free as part of this course, as you will find many more exercises on appositives in the section on nouns, and also in a later section on phrases and clauses. It's on page 88 of my printed version, but in your PDFs it should be the same. So if you want more exercises on appositives, do try Appositives Revisited, and the earlier chapter, Nouns, has a lot of information about defining, non-defining appositives. So these are great fun, and this is why I enjoy teaching this topic. And being honest, I think that the most the most fun part of language mastery is using the language in persuasive and skillful ways. And so looking at how we can arrange our phrases, our clauses, our appositives, our prepositional phrases, looking at all of these different things that we can do is looking at how to improve our language, and it is looking at how to improve our rhetoric. Okay, so I want you to think of appositives as reduced relative clauses. Now, we haven't done relative clauses yet, but we will do them, and you will see that relative clauses are just like appositives. They also have this defining and non-defining distinction. And if you want a quick explanation of what a relative clause is, it's a clause that starts with who, which, that, whose, or whom, and it describes a noun. So it's an adjectival clause. But what we're dealing with is appositives, and appositives look like this. You've got noun phrase, but they are not two different things. Yeah, if you say John, Harry and Philip are coming to the party, that is not an appositive. That's a list of 3 different objects. John, Harry, Philip, or whatever I just said. I've forgotten it already. It's 3 different people. But if you say Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, a well-known 19th century writer, that is 3 noun phrases. Yeah, Conan Doyle, first one, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, second one, and a 19th century writer, third one. They're all referring to the same object. They're all referring to Arthur Conan Doyle. Okay, and because they're all referring to the same object, we call them appositives. So Conan Doyle and creator of Sherlock Holmes and the 19th century writer, they're the same noun, the same object, even though they're different ways of naming the same noun. So we call them appositives. Okay, so that in a nutshell is what an appositive is. But the reason it's the same as a reduced relative clause is because you can say Conan Doyle, who was the creator of Sherlock Holmes, and when you put in who was, you've got a full relative clause. And so this is why they're called reduced relative clauses. We could make it longer and say Conan Doyle, who was the creator of Sherlock Holmes, or we can just say Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes. Okay, and now just like relative clauses, defining and non-defining is important with these guys. Now, what do I mean defining or non-defining? Well, I often give the example of my wife who works in London, yeah, when I'm doing relative clauses, and you'll see this. If I've only got one wife and I say my wife who works in London, I've only got one wife, so I am not defining which one. And I think that's so important, guys. I always think of it like this. Are you defining or non-defining which one? Yeah, that's the big question. And so if I start with Peter and Philip, I am not defining which Peter and Philip when I say my colleagues. And that's why this is a non-defining appositive and it needs commas. I'm not defining which Peter and Philip. I probably only know one Peter and Philip, or it's probably really clear to the other person that these are Peter and Philip that you and I both know. And so that would be non-defining and you'd use commas. But if we swap these guys around and we say my colleagues who were Peter and Philip would be full relative clause, yeah, aren't we defining which one of your colleagues you're talking about? You know, you've probably got many colleagues, more than just Peter and Philip. And when we say my colleagues Peter and Philip, we are defining which my colleagues. And so no commas in this one. If you are defining which one, we're defining which my colleagues, Peter and Philip. Out of a big group, we're defining just those two. And so no commas here. My colleagues, Peter and Philip, refuse to join us. So this would be exactly the same for this example I was just mentioning about my wife. If I have something like this, my wife, Asya, I really have to remember the commas. Because if I don't remember the commas, then I am defining which one of my wives, and I have many wives. And so if I take the commas out of that, and I say my wife Asya without commas, that means I have multiple wives, and Asya is one of those wives. But that's not true. I've only got one wife, and she's called Asya, and so I put commas around the name Asya. Okay, this is exactly the same logic as what I'm trying to show here. If you have any questions about this defining, non-defining difference, please put them under the video. It's really important and it's very often poorly understood. Even among English teachers, I think, it can be very poorly understood, but it needs to be understood. And once it is understood, a lot of your punctuation problems disappear, because so many times this comes up with punctuation. So this is a little bit about punctuation. It's important for punctuation. Now let's come back to appositives. Yeah, you can tell again, please do note that Peter and Philip are my colleagues. And so notice that both noun phrases, and it's got to be a noun phrase, guys, an A positive. It can't be an adjective or an adverb. It's got to be a thing and then another thing, but they both refer to the same thing. Peter and Philip are my colleagues. My colleagues are Peter and Philip. So that's why it's definitely an A positive. Yeah, don't get A positives mixed up with other things. So there's 3 ways, actually, we can punctuate an A positive, and this is going to confuse some people. I always found it quite strange. We could punctuate it like this. We could say Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, wrote, allegedly, The Hound of the Baskervilles. Yeah, something like that. And that would be a non-defining A positive, because we're not defining which Conan Doyle. There's only one Conan Doyle, and you and I all know which Conan Doyle I am referring to. And this is why it is up to the writer whether you put these commas in or not. The writer has to decide, am I defining which one? And most of the time you're not, to be fair. And so you need commas. It's going to be a non-defining A positive. But occasionally you are, like this one, yeah? So that's one way of punctuating A positives. That's a non-defining way. Now let's look at the defining way. The con artist. There are many con artists in the world. A con artist is a scammer. A con artist is somebody who tries to trick and deceive, very often to make money. And I'm afraid that as much as I love Conan Doyle's writing, I really do. I love his Sherlock Holmes. I love his horror stories. I've read so many of his stories. I really have. And I have concluded that the man himself was not a nice man. I actually believe he was a con artist. I believe he was a scammer. I believe he wanted to spread strange ideas in order to enrich himself and his new wife, who claimed that she could speak to the dead. Now, this is why if I start with the con artist, it's a defining A positive. The con artist Conan Doyle. I'm defining which con artist. The con artist Conan Doyle, the scammer Conan Doyle, and I do not use commas because, you know, there are loads of con artists in the world. They're everywhere. They're still around. There are still those people that say, I can put you in touch with your dead mother. I can put you in touch with your dead son. And Conan Doyle was one of those guys, I'm afraid. If you don't believe me, have a look at some of the photographs online of Conan Doyle in a photo which he faked of his dead son, right up here as a ghost, and Conan Doyle speaking to his dead son's ghost. And he did that to make people believe that he could speak to the dead and that his wife could speak to the dead. And it was one of many things that he did, and he was not a fool, he was a doctor. An eye doctor, I think. Have a look at the next one. Look, this is the 3rd way that you see A positives punctuated, and it's a bit strange. And notice that the article even changes from the con artist to a con artist. Conan Doyle sold the idea of fairies at the bottom of the garden and life after death to those who were easily deceived, to those who had lost loved ones, to those who were desperate to speak to their dying relatives, and Conan Doyle was there to put them in touch with their dying relatives. Terrible, but true, as far as I can see. Please, if you have any comments about that claim, put them under the video, but have a look online and you'll see what I mean. So, a 3rd way of punctuating A positives is starting with the indefinite article quite often, and then saying a con artist, comma, just one comma, and then Conan Doyle sold the idea of fairies and life after death to those who were easily deceived. And I would say that this, when you do it like this seems more like an adverb. It seems more like an absolute phrase. Have a look at the future classes on absolute phrases to see what I mean. But it seems more like an absolute phrase, giving you a comment on the whole rest of the main clause. In other words, it sounds to me like this. A well-known con artist, because of the fact that we all know he was a con artist, Conan Doyle sold the idea of fairies and life after death to those who were easily deceived. But I want you to remember that that's another way of punctuating A positives, and it is something you see very often in literature. So I wanted to mention that as well. You've got non-defining way with 2 commas, defining way with no commas, and then this way where I think it's kind of like a fronted noun phrase. Well, it is a fronted noun phrase, and it's referring to Conan Doyle, of course. But I think it's more descriptive, more literary when you do this, and you do see it. You see things like a great scientist, comma, Isaac Newton was born on Christmas Day. It's another example I very often use. Okay, so there are actually 3 ways of punctuating A positives, and for more information, please look in the PDF that I've attached to this course, because I wrote that PDF to explain all of these details. I know there are many. Now, there's loads of different things you can do with appositives, which is the main reason, I suppose, why I think they are rhetorical. You know, they can really enrich your spoken English. They can really enrich your written English. They can really make your language sound elegant and intelligent. And so here are some various types of appositive. First one is just multiple appositive, yeah? You don't need to have two appositives like this, 1, 2, why not 3? Yeah, and let's have a look at Mary Shelley doing that in Frankenstein. This is from Frankenstein. It was indeed a paradise compared to the bleak forest, my former residence, rain-dropping branches and dank earth. I hope you'll feel how that sounds beautiful because of the multiple appositive put at the end of the sentence. It's what adds to the beauty of the language, yeah? And so it's perhaps some kind of stylistic device. Maybe it's a better word for it rather than a rhetorical device. Rhetorical usually refers to spoken language. And I must admit this was written in a book. But Frankenstein's monster is speaking at this moment, and he is a very intelligent monster if you listen to him. He has some lovely linguistic ability, and so it's nice to hear this multiple appositive at the end of the sentence. It keeps the sentence going. It sounds really good. You know, the bleak forest is my former residence, which is full of rain-dropping branches and dank earth. That's all it is, rain-dropping branches and wet earth, damp earth, dank earth. Yeah, and you've got 1, 2, 3 noun phrases in a row, all referring to the place that the monster used to live. Yeah, you got 3, and some might even say it's 4 with rain-dropping branches and dank earth. But I would suggest that that one's all in one, the rain-dropping branches and dank earth. That is the bleak forest. So you can have a multiple appositive, and it sounds nice with that repetition at the end. It keeps the sentence going longer than you expect. But it's not just that you can do with appositives. What else can you do? You could have the same noun repeated in your appositive, and this is very, very common, guys. Have a look at this from 1984 by George Orwell. The real power, the power we have to fight for night and day, is not power over things, but over men. Now, notice firstly that power is repeated 3 times, but this is the appositive right here at the start, because the real power is the power we have to fight for night and day. And I want you to notice as well that noun phrases are not necessarily just 2 words, like the painting. You know, the painting is a noun phrase, but have a look at this noun phrase, the power that we have to fight for night and day. That is actually a noun phrase with a relative clause. You just can't see the that because we often omit the that, with a relative clause inside the noun phrase. And so the real power, the power that we have to fight for night and day, the power that we have to fight for night and day is a thing, just like the real power is a thing. And so this is an appositive, and it's an appositive where we use exactly the same noun in both parts, power, power, and it gives it that lovely repetition in the middle of the sentence of power, power. Now, I don't know if that's called epistrophe or anadiplosis or anaphora, but this repetition is definitely a rhetorical device. And so, of course, appositives are used in rhetorical devices. Okay, you might prefer to use the Greek word of, I think it's epistrophe, but I'm not sure, for when you repeat the same word in the middle of the sentence or in the middle of consecutive sentences. But this is in the middle of the same sentence. So, of course, repetition is a way of persuading people. It's a way of improving your language. It's a way of making your language more powerful. And so the real power, the power, of course, this is a rhetorical device. And notice that he does actually use power one more time, although it's not really an appositive because it's coming after the verb is not power. You know, negative appositives are another type of appositive when you make, you know, when you make the previous, when you say power, not power, that's a negative appositive when you suddenly make the next one not. But because the verb's in there, I wouldn't call this an appositive. You know, it seems to me you've got to have noun phrase, and not noun phrase is noun phrase, because that's a little bit different. But still, he's got the repetition power 3 times. And then look at this repetition at the end, over things, but over men, yeah, with a conjunction in the middle. Over things, over men. That's a preposition, so this is not an appositive, yeah? I want to make it clear that when you've got a prepositional phrase repeated, it sounds beautiful. Yes, it's another form of rhetoric. It's another form of making your language more powerful. But no, it's not an appositive. And that's just because we've defined an appositive as noun phrase, and not prepositional phrase, prepositional phrase. Yet repeated prepositional phrases are used in rhetoric all the time, such as government, of the people, for the people, by the people, of the people, for the people, by the people are 3 prepositional phrases. They're repeated 3 times. And notice the repetition of the people, the people, the people. Okay, so repetition is big in rhetoric. Okay, look at the next one. So that's our noun repetition appositive. All subsequent crimes against the party, all treacheries, acts of sabotage, heresies, deviations, sprang directly out of his teaching. Now, this is George Orwell's 1984. He's talking about a guy who is used, his name's Manuel Goldstein. He is used as the face of the enemy of the people. And you can think of him kind of like Osama bin Laden, or the way Saddam Hussein was drawn, was illustrated, was portrayed in Western media. You can think of him as exactly the same as that, because that's exactly what he is. He's a bogeyman that the state creates, the government creates to frighten the little children, a little bit like diseases are sometimes used. So what we're doing here, all subsequent crimes against the party, all treacheries. Notice that all subsequent crimes is all treacheries. So he's repeated the all at first, which is all acts of sabotage, all heresies, all deviations. He's renaming. I mean, these are synonyms: a crime, a heresy, a deviation, an act of sabotage, treachery. So this is what we call a list appositive, where we list lots of different it's very similar to a multiple appositive, but where we list in the middle lots of different things that come back to all subsequent crimes. List appositives start with all. You need an all in there, because then you list what you mean by all the crimes. So the treacheries, acts of sabotage, heresies, deviations, sprang directly out of his teaching. Yeah, he was the embodiment of evil. That's the idea. But notice that the appositive makes that sentence really nice. It's what makes the sentence interesting. Now, here are 2 more types of appositive, because really there's loads of things you can do with this noun phrase referring to one object. This one's from Animal Farm, and again, notice how long an appositive can be. You young porkers who are sitting in front of me. Now, once again, I mean, really, we've got an appositive there. Someone has told me this before, actually, that here you've got a defining appositive. You young porkers. Yeah, so really you've got one there as well, and I do agree. Clever student that made that point, and he's right, absolutely. You is the young porkers, and so you've got an appositive there. But notice that this is a relative clause. We've spoken about relative clauses a couple of times today, and I said they started with who, or which, or that, or whose, or whom. And this relative clause is part of the noun phrase, just like this relative clause was part of the noun phrase. And what I mean by that is it's inside the noun phrase. It's not higher than the noun, because it describes the noun. So it's lower down the hierarchy, and that's important. This is why this is a noun phrase, because the power is the main word there, and that we have to fight for day and night describes power. Just like young porkers, or you, is the main word here, and who are sitting in front of me describes those young porkers. Anyway, you've got a very long noun phrase there. You young porkers who are sitting in front of me. Every one of you will scream your lives out at the block within a year. This is the head pig, Napoleon, talking to the other pigs, trying to use rhetoric to persuade them, and that's why he's used an appositive, right? Because he likes to persuade, and that's what rhetoric is. You young porkers who are sitting in front of me, every one of you will scream your lives out at the block within a year. Okay, he's telling them that they're going to be killed very soon by Mr. Jones on the farm, so they had better join him and the other animals in their rebellion against the farmer. Okay, and that's what we call a fronted appositive, because notice that that appositive is put right at the front. Every one of you refers to the you young porkers who are sitting in front of me. So this is a fronted appositive, it's put at the front. It doesn't have to be put at the front. We can also have a noun here, the smell, as the subject to the verb was. The smell was already filling the room. Yeah, that's our main clause. The smell was already filling the room, comma. A rich, hot smell. Notice we're renaming the subject of the verb we're renaming here. So I call this one an extraposed appositive, just because of what some other parts in grammar are called. But there's something called extraposition, which is putting things right at the end of the sentence. But I mean, I don't care how you call this a positive. What I want you to see is that it's a different type of a positive than this nice simple one at the beginning. Because really, we're renaming the smell, which was already filling the room, yeah? We're renaming the smell was already filling the room, comma, a rich hot smell, which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. So we're renaming the very first noun phrase, which is just the smell. And we're doing noun repetition because we have got a smell down here. A rich hot smell which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. Notice that this a positive is put right on the end, even though the first noun comes right at the beginning. So that's a little bit different from what we've seen in these other examples. Okay, I hope that this has inspired you to use a positives in your writing and in your speaking, because they really are a great deal of fun, and they really are what separates people who speak in a boring way from people who speak in an interesting way. And so I really can't emphasize this anymore, guys. If you're not using a variety of a positives in your writing and in your speaking, then you are missing out on all the fun. That is the way I would put it. You are missing out on all the fun. Now, if anyone has any questions about all of this, I do understand that it's complex. Even identifying a positives is not easy, but you need to make sure you see noun phrase and noun phrase referring to one object. That's the main idea. And please do have a look at my book for more exercises on this tricky topic, but rewarding topic. Okay, so thanks everybody for watching. I hope you've enjoyed that, and I hope that you now go out and use a positives and have great fun doing so. Thanks for watching. Okay, welcome to a class today on noun phrases and noun clauses. We looked at a positives in the X is the same again as this one, what they do, this one, what they do. So people know what they do. Frequently they know why they do what they do. But what they don't know is... Okay, welcome. Welcome to a class today on noun phrases and noun clauses. We looked at appositives in the last class, and so you should be familiar already with a noun phrase. If I were going to give a definition of a noun phrase, so that we can separate it from a prepositional phrase or from an adjectival phrase, an adverbial phrase, although I must point out that some noun phrases are adverbial phrases, we call those absolute phrases. We will look at those in the future. But if I were going to give a definition of a noun phrase, I would say it's any group of words where the head word, the most important word, is a noun, okay? And so I'm going to take one of the appositives from the last class. I think we had, I can't remember what book it's from. I'm sure it's Orwell, but he says the smell, blah, 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 the room, something, there's the main cause, and then a rich hot smell, which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood, okay? And this is actually a noun phrase. All of that long string of words is a noun phrase. Now, why is that a noun phrase and not an adjectival phrase or an adverbial phrase or something like that, something different, or a prepositional phrase? Well, it's because the head word is a noun. Now, how do I know that that is a head word, the head word, and how do I know it's a noun? Well, I know it's a noun. Let me tell you how I know it's a noun first. I know it's a noun because it's got a determiner before it. And determiners identify or quantify the noun. That's all they do. And so you don't see a without a noun coming after it. Now, rich isn't a noun because it describes the noun, it's a rich smell. Hot isn't a noun because it describes the noun, it's a hot smell. So those two are adjectives, and this is a determiner, which is a type of adjective, really, yeah, because it identifies or quantifies the noun. Now, what I've just told you is that this word describes smell, this word describes smell, this word describes smell. Now, what does that mean? Excuse me. That means that smell is higher in the hierarchy than a, rich and hot. It means that that's a more important word, yeah? It means that if we just take those four words, a rich, hot, smell, smell is definitely the head word because every other word is describing the smell. And when you think about it, a rich, hot smell, is it a thing or does it describe a thing? Because if it's a thing, it's a noun. If it describes a thing, it's an adjective. Now, when you think about it, a rich, hot smell, that's a thing. Yeah, it's a smell. And it's a rich smell and a hot smell and a smell. Smell is the head word, guys, because it's being described by all the other words, okay? And what about the rest of it? Well, this part, which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. Well, I have mentioned now a couple of times on this course relative clauses. And relative clauses start with which, that, whose, what, which, that, whose, whom. I'm forgetting one. Which, that, who, whose, whom. And also what and a few others, although the what relative clauses tend to be noun clauses, which we'll see actually down here in a moment. But this relative clause, the reason why it is lower in the hierarchy than the smell is because relative clause is always an adjectival clause. Okay, I said always, sorry. You can't say always in grammar. Relative clause is usually an adjectival clause. Yeah, usually this relative clause describes a noun. And this relative clause certainly describes smell, yeah? I want to point out as well that relative clause is a type of subordinate clause. Subordinate clause means it's not complete on its own. You can't just say which seemed like a smell, which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. You can't say that and make a complete sentence. It isn't a complete sentence. But it is a clause. We still call it a clause. And why? Because a clause must have a subject and a verb. And this clause, this relative clause here, does have a subject and a verb. It's right here. The subject is which, it's the smell. Which is a pronoun standing in for smell. It's the smell that seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. So there's a subject, there's the verb. That's a preposition, and then an object, and then another preposition, and then an object. Yeah? And that means that it's a clause. If you've got a subject and a verb as the main elements, it's a clause. However, and this is really important, and it's a big however, I want you to understand that this relative clause is lower down the hierarchy than smell. Why is it lower? Because it describes the smell. The smell doesn't describe it, it describes the smell. And so this is the head word, guys. Every other word is lower down the hierarchy than smell, and that means that that is a noun phrase. Now, it's a phrase rather than a clause, because in a noun clause, you will always have a subject and a verb as the main elements. But the subject and verb here are not the main elements in this noun phrase, and we can see that because the relative clause describes the noun smell. Okay? Now, I'm going to go into this in more detail with these examples, and I hope it will make things a little bit clearer. Because some of you might be already confused about how can a clause be lower than a phrase in the hierarchy. And I understand your confusion. Now, I want to add a few more key concepts here. What does a noun do? Yeah, we're going to talk about what does a noun actually do. Well, a noun can be the subject of the verb, yeah? And when I say noun, I mean any noun phrase can be the subject of the verb. So we ought to be able to take this noun phrase and make it subject to the verb. For example, a rich, hot smell, which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood, covered the room. And that means that that noun phrase is the subject of covered. But it can be the object of a verb as well. We could say, his nostrils detected a rich, hot smell, which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. That would be the object of detected. And we could also make the noun phrase the object of a preposition by saying he complained about a rich hot smell which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. So those three jobs are three of the main functions of the noun. But don't let me forget subject complement, because otherwise somebody will tell me, hey Dave, it's not always an object. Sometimes it's the complement of a copular verb, which is true. And all they're saying here, some of you might not see this, but you can say this as well. Here's subject complement. It was X. Yeah, it was a rich hot smell which seemed like an emanation from his early childhood. That would be subject complement. Yeah, it just means after a copular verb like to be, it can function as the complement of a copular verb like to be. I know it's complicated, guys. I know, but we're going to go into all of these details as we go further, and it should get easier and easier. Now, I do want to point out there are exceptions to this idea that a noun's always subject complement, subject to verb, object to preposition. There are some exceptions. For example, appositives. Appositives don't always do that. Okay, they very often just sat there next to the noun, renaming the noun. Okay, so there are exceptions. Now let's go further into this. What the hell is a phrase? What the hell is a clause? I want you to compare this. The boy wearing a hat. And I want you to really feel how different that is from the boy was wearing a hat. The second sentence, number 2, is a main clause. And what main clause means is that you can put a full stop on the end and it's a complete thought, a complete sentence. Number 1 is not a main clause. No way is it a main clause. You couldn't put a full stop there. Yeah? Why? Because it's missing a verb. And because it's missing a verb, it doesn't have a subject and a verb. And because it hasn't got a subject and a verb, because the boy isn't doing anything, and I want you to remember that, the boy isn't doing anything in number 1. In number 2, he is doing something. He is wearing a hat. But in number 1, the boy isn't doing anything. It's a noun phrase. This is the head word, boy. The describes boy, and wearing a hat describes boy. So boy is top of the hierarchy, it's a noun, a thing, and this is a noun phrase. Okay, but the second one, as soon as we add the verb to be, we've got a main clause. Yeah. Now, what about something like the boy called Simon? Is the boy called Simon a noun phrase or a main clause? Think about it for a few seconds. Which one is it? Is it a noun phrase or a main clause? Because I hope after a few seconds of thought, you might be able to see that it could be either. It could be an action. Yeah, you might be saying boy called Simon. Maybe you mean phoned. Yeah, boy called Simon. Full stop. That could be a main clause. Boy called Simon. Yeah. Or you might mean that the boy's name was Simon. And if you mean that the boy's name was Simon, then called is not a verb, but it's something that we call a participle. In other words, an adjective. Yeah, and so if you're saying that the boy's name was Simon, then that's a noun phrase and that's a participle. But if it's a complete thought and it's what the boy is doing, he is calling Simon or he has called Simon, then it's a main clause and that is 100% a verb, not a participle. Let me show you this with this sentence. Look at this. How we punctuate this changes the meaning of the sentence. Have a look at this. The boy called Simon, comma, told him the news, Oxford, comma, and asked for help. Okay, that is 3 actions. He called Simon, number 1, told him the news, number 2, and asked for help, number 3. 3 actions. It's a list of 3 verb phrases. And we call this a verb phrase because the most important word is a verb. We call this a verb phrase because the most important word is a verb. And we call this a verb phrase because the most important word is a verb. Okay, it might mean that. But if we just take this comma away, Then we got the boy called Simon told him the news and asked for help. And we need to take this one away as well. Take that Oxford comma away. The boy called Simon told him the news and asked for help. Maybe we mean that. Maybe we mean the boy whose name was Simon told him the news and asked for help. So I hope you can see that the boy called Simon could be a noun phrase, or it could be a main clause. And that should help you understand the difference between phrases and clauses, because that's what we're looking at today, guys. We're looking at phrases and clauses. Now, I want to show you a few noun clauses down the bottom quickly, and then we'll go on to Michel Foucault's skillful use of noun clauses, because it is skillful, there's no doubt about it. So, noun clauses. Here's an example of a noun clause. Whatever you say, that is subject of the verb, won't change. Yeah, there's your verb in the future tense, won't change. Whatever you say won't change my mind. There's your object, my mind. Yeah, it's what's being operated on by the verb change. So that's a noun clause. Yeah, and why is it a noun clause? Because it's got a subject and a verb inside it. Yeah, it's got a subject that is, the main elements are you say. Whatever you say whatever. And that is functioning as the subject of won't change. So it's doing one of our 4 things that nouns do. It's functioning as a noun. Whatever you say won't change my mind. Whatever you do won't help. Would also be a noun clause being used as the subject of a verb, won't help. Here's another way that another time we very often see noun clauses, and that's something like this. We knew X. We knew he was married. Notice he was married has got a subject he and a verb was. So we knew that he was married. That he was married is a noun clause, okay? It's a noun clause. It's still a subordinate clause, even though he was married looks like a main clause. But it's a subordinate clause because it depends on the verb knew to exist, basically. It is what we knew. And so it's subordinate to we knew. Yeah, it's the object of we knew, okay? And here's another example of a noun clause. I can't figure out how much we should pay. Now, how much we, subject, verb, should pay. Yeah, but both should and pay are verbs, aren't they? How much we should pay is a noun clause, and it is the object of the preposition out. Yeah. Here we had it as the object of the verb knew. But here we've got it as the object of the preposition out, and that's another thing that noun clauses or noun phrases do. Noun phrases or noun clauses function in one of those ways. Now, I just want to show you a sentence now that can show you how you can really improve your rhetoric, really improve the way you speak, if you think about phrases and clauses and arrange them in a beautiful way. So have a look at the following. People know what they do. Frequently, they know why they do what they do. But what they don't know is what they do does. Now, I really like this sentence. I think it's a great sentence for showing noun clauses, because what we're saying here, guys, is people know X. X is the object of know, yeah? And what is X? Well, it's people know what they do. That is a very simple noun clause, yeah? What they do is the object of know. So people know X, they know what they do. Frequently, they know why they do X, they know why they do what they do. And what I really like about this is that the second noun clause, what they do, is the object of the first noun clause, why they do X, why they do what they do. So what we've got here is a noun clause wrapped in a noun clause, yeah? We've got what they do wrapped in why they do, and that's the object of know. So they know why they do what they do. And then what we've got is a noun clause. What they don't know is a noun clause, and it's the subject of the verb is. But what they don't know, yeah, and notice how similar that is to they know, yeah, they know, but what they don't know, it's a lovely repetition of why they, what they, why they, what they. But what they don't know, noun clause, is, and then again, we've got this noun clause within noun clause. What they do is one noun clause, and what X does is another noun clause. And notice that what they do, X, is the same again as this one, what they do, this one, what they do. So people know what they do. Frequently they know why they do what they do. But what they don't know is what they do does. And you've got that noun clause within noun clause again. So I hope that you also find some inspiration from sentences like this, because I find them really clever. And I think they've been arranged in a very clever way. Foucault could have just said, people know X, they know why they do X, but they don't know what X does. He could have just said it like that, basically. They know what they're doing, they know why they do these things, but they don't know what these things do. Something really boring like that. But he didn't. He decided to make it a lot more interesting by playing with noun clauses within noun clauses. So this is what we're going to do a lot of on this course. We're going to look at phrases and clauses and their arrangement and try to think of ways that we can improve our own language by arranging phrases and clauses in a beautiful way. Okay? Now, one more thing about noun clauses that I forgot to mention is that they very often start with those words. And you can see it here of whatever you say started with whatever. What we had, and why, and what, and what, and what, and what. So what is very often in noun clauses. You can have how as well, like I can't figure out how we got here, I can't figure out how much we should pay, so how or how much. And you also have where and when, very often in these noun clauses. You don't have to have these words though, and I should have put that really there, but this that, especially in these we knew that, he explained that, he said that, he told me that, the that is very often dropped, but it's still a noun clause. And very often in these noun clauses, you don't have to have these words though, and I should put that really there, but this that, especially in these we knew that, he explained that, he said that, he told me that, the that is very often dropped, but it's still a noun clause that comes after the that. So these noun clauses don't start with one of these words, and so that noun clauses don't always start with these words, but they often do. Okay, any questions about any of this, please put them under the video, and we will go further in the next class and delve a little bit deeper into the details of how to beautifully arrange phrases and clauses. And of course, I want you to have fun with this, guys, and play with the language. Okay, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all soon. Okay, welcome to another class on nouns. We have seen in the first class that when you have two noun phrases that refer to one object in the same sentence, we call that an appositive. And there are many different types of appositive. There are many different things you can do with an appositive. Then we looked at phrases and clauses. And I wanted to show you that noun phrases, firstly, are not just one word. They might be 20 words, but the head word, the most important word, the word being described by all the other words, must be a noun. And then we looked at phrases and clauses, and we've already touched on this, and you will gain more and more understanding of what phrase means and what clause means as we go through this course. Because it's not an easy question to answer what a phrase is or what a clause is. But a clause must have a subject and a verb as the main elements. That's the definition of a clause. And so we saw that you could have a clause as the subject of a verb, or the object of a verb, or the object of a preposition. For example, how we got here, or I don't know how we got here. That's the object of know. I don't know what. How we got here. And how we got here is a noun clause. It's the object of know. Okay, but today I want to show you that nouns are not always nouns. Yeah, what you might think of as a noun, like bread, is not always functioning as a noun. Yeah, bread is a thing. Of course it's a thing. So most of the time when you see the word bread in a sentence, it is a noun and it's functioning as a noun. Yeah, and we categorize bread as a noun. And what I mean by categorize is if you look in a dictionary and you look up bread, you will find noun written right next to it, because most of the time it's a noun, so we categorize it as a noun. However, that doesn't mean that it always functions as a noun. And so we have quite a few compound nouns in English. For example, bread, products, cat, food, alarm, clock. And what you might notice in each of these noun combinations is that the first noun describes the second noun. What kind of products? Bread products, yeah, not some other kind of products. What kind of food? Cat food, and not dog food, for example. What kind of clock? Alarm clock, a clock with an alarm. So you can see that here the noun is functioning as an adjective. And this is something that's important to be aware of, because we are looking at the function of words. And there's no denying it that in these compound noun forms, the first word is like an adjective. It is an adjective. It's a noun functioning as an adjective. Yeah. Now, I want to quickly point out that in a lot of other languages, they won't say cat food. They will say cat's food. Yeah, in a lot of other languages, they make the first noun an adjective. They make it an adjective by adding an apostrophe and an S. Because when you think about it, let's put my name with an apostrophe and an S. That is an adjective. Yeah, if I say Dave's pen, Dave's is describing the pen. It's describing who the pen belongs to. And so in a lot of other languages, they will write cat's food or something like that. Yeah, they will make that first word an adjective because it is an adjective. Yeah, but English, I suppose it used to be cat's food. And over time, that has dropped off the end of the word and it's become cat food. But I just wanted to mention that, and it's because I have a lot of learners of English as a foreign language, and I think a lot of them will be tempted to write that. And I've seen it as well with things like project components. When people talk about their project at work, project is a noun, of course, but when you say project components, it's a compound noun. And we don't usually say projects components. And we often don't do that with the word project. It seems to me that project very easily becomes an adjective, and again, without this apostrophe S, okay? So that's something that I thought I'd mention right from the start, so that everybody understands that nouns do function as adjectives sometimes, and it's compound nouns when it's noun and noun, yeah? That you want to look out for this, okay? Now let's go on to nouns functioning as adverbs, because actually nouns, all the time, function as adverbs. Have a look at this. And I wanted to give you two sentences so that you could see yesterday being used as a noun and yesterday being used as an adverb. And it will help you understand, what does it mean to be a noun? Well, it means to be the subject of a verb or the object of a verb or the object of a preposition. We've done this several times already. And so you can see yesterday here is the subject of was. Yesterday was very windy. That means yesterday here is a noun. It's functioning as a thing. And I'm sure you all agree that the day before today is a thing. It's a thing, isn't it, the day before today? But it also tells you when something happened. And so if we look at the second example, I finished my project yesterday. Here, yesterday is describing the verb finished. It's telling you when you finished the project. And anything telling you the when, where, the how, the why of the verb is an adverb. So here is functioning as an adverb, and here is functioning as a noun. And that's very, very common. Exactly the same for today. Yeah, we could say today was very windy. I finished my project today. And tomorrow, tomorrow will be very windy, and I will finish my project tomorrow. And lots of other time expressions like next week, next year, last week, last year. And what you might notice if you're a student of English as a foreign language is that those adverbials, that next year, last week, they often drop the article. It's not the next week or the next year. It's just next week, next year, last week, last year. And it kind of makes sense when you start to think, well, it is functioning as an adverb rather than a noun. And so perhaps that explains partially why we don't use an article with next week, last year, and those other adverbials. Okay, so you can see that the same word is so important in grammar. A word like that could be a subordinating conjunction or a pronoun or a determiner or an adverb. So it has a lot of different functions, and you have to analyse different sentences and decide, is it a noun or an adverb? Well, it's a noun here because it's subject of the verb. But here it's definitely an adverb because it's describing the verb finished. Okay, so let's go on to some more. 5 years would be a lenient sentence. I hope everybody can see that 5 years here, 5 years is a thing. In fact, it's 5 things. So it must be a thing, right?